Good morning, gardening friends. Today is Friday, June 2nd. It's a beautiful day today. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. Very quiet. Garden is waking up, and so are the builders in the neighborhood. A lot is happening. Things are growing hand over fist. And I thought I'd just show you some of the things that have changed since last week. Not much change on this Sarracenia, but it is looking fantastic. Here you can see the colocasia. I thought I would share this with you. This was the one that came over from my neighbor's fence. And now you see how it spreads. So don't plant it in the ground if you're in a zone 8B or higher, because it will spread those, whatever you want to call them, runners. I don't know the technical term for them. They'll go about 6 feet in 1 year. And every now and then they'll send up a little plantlet like they did back there. And that little plantlet will set out roots so they can populate an area very quickly. Here you can see my angel's trumpet is starting to get a little less bug-eaten. My caladiums that I saved from last year, Kathleen is the name of them, are coming up. I like Kathleen because they have a fragrance. You don't usually think of caladiums blooming, but they do. And that particular one has a fragrance. Here you can see the flowers on my equisetum. Kind of inconspicuous. You don't really notice them unless you have an equisetum up close. And again, that would spread all over my backyard if I didn't keep it in a pot. I was correct with my Plumeria. I'm not going to count my flowers before they bloom, but you can see that was indeed a bloom stalk, or a flower stalk, as well as on that side. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will bloom. My luck with Plumerias, I used to have a huge one years ago. Don't move them. Once when you find a spot where they're growing, don't touch them, don't move them. If you just tip them a little bit, like an inch to one side, it's going to drop leaves. It kind of sends out leaves to the amount of sun that it gets, and it positions them just right, so it's not a plant to be moved unless you want the leaves to fall off. It's also a little fragile. You have to be careful you don't bump into it because it's very easy to break leaves. Miss Mimi is out. It's cool enough. The bugs are out too. The mosquitoes are getting terrible. I'm covered from head to toe with mosquito spray. And you have to spray your shoulders too on your shirt because they will bite through fabric. This little topiary rosemary is doing well. I repotted it this year. It didn't do anything last year, but just stay the size it was. And what I did is I knocked most of the old root ball off. I cut it down to about the size of my fist and repotted it in some fresh soil. And I just use regular potting soil. Even though it's a Mediterranean plant, I didn't use cactus. I just use regular potting. And you can see I've already been pinching it back, so it likes the new fertilizer and dirt. The roses have grown so rampantly that they have covered over the little water feature down there. I have been bringing the roses in because it is quite hot and they will kind of turn to char during the heat of the day. I've got 2 in the house now. If you cut them and bring them in the house, they'll last for a good 3 or 4 days. Very fragrant. Those are Oklahoma. That's the reason why I bought them, was for the fragrance. Here you can see the little sedum clump that I propagated a few weeks ago. What I did to get it looking like that is when I broke the little pieces of sedum off, I clumped them like in little handheld posies and then just stuck them in the ground. And they will more than likely grow, provided you keep it damp. This one actually has sent out some new growth since I repotted it. And I put that in the pots that I have my grape hyacinths in, because they don't really show any interest the rest of the year. So now they will. And I don't believe the grape hyacinths will be impacted at all as long as I fertilize it. That's the seedling of the Dracaena that I had last year, Devil's Trumpet. And here's the Angel's Trumpet. This is a cutting. It didn't really grow. They don't like pots. However, it is sending out a flower. Well, they like pots if you can fertilize the heck out of them and give them plenty of food. So I am using Miracle Grow on that pot about every 2 weeks, just a full strength, not mixed any harsher or stronger than that. You can see the lilies of the Nile are doing fine, and I am the king of denial here. These geraniums, or really pelargoniums, I bought 2 years ago to put in these urns, and I procrastinated to the point where they just seem to do really well in that spot. And of course, if I had put them in the urns, they would have frozen. They would have died this winter. However, putting them in these pots, I could bring them in, and so I saved them. Oh, I should mention one of the failures again is I did plant some more dill here, and a bunch of it sprouted, and it looks like only 2 are coming up, and they don't look all that promising. I did thin the bananas out. Let's get a shot here so I don't trip over anything. Hopefully I get in the shade. I took one of the bananas out, and I think I'm just going to let these 3 grow this year rather than have a bunch. And I think I've mentioned before, for those of you that grow bananas or are not used to growing bananas, typically what happens is if you cut them back, they don't sprout back from the same stalk that you cut off. What they'll do is they'll send out little shoots to the side of that and come up that way. So all of these are shoots from the main stalks last year. You can't really see them very well. I guess I could try to get in there. But there you can see the big stub from one of the tall ones last year. So those stubs don't typically grow back. Now, having said that, in the front yard, I cut my stalks only half down, and they did sprout back from the original stalk. There's Miss Mimi soaking up the sunshine. I'm going to be working this week back in here. I have finally decided that we're going to take out this Loquat tree. I'm not sad over it. I had mentioned last time that I'm reluctant to take trees out because they take so long to grow. Well, I got to thinking about it. I have a friend that's very good on dates and remembering things, and he did point out that that Loquat was planted in 2015. So it's not really that old, but I do believe it is certifiably dead. Even the sprouts coming up from the roots are now turning brown. So I'm going to attempt to very carefully take it out and not damage the other things underneath. Probably what I'll do is use a handsaw and start at the top of the tree and just take little pieces down. Here you can see my ponytail palm. It has greened up on the top where it was yellow from being inside. And I think I mentioned I did repot that. I will move that when we cut the tree. I'm not certain I'm going to put anything in its place because one of you had asked a question about Bottlebrush And there is a bottlebrush bush back there. And once exposed to the sun, that will probably grow to be about 10 feet tall. I really only need things about the size of the palm there, the Mediterranean fan palm. I only need about 2 feet above my fence to give me pretty good privacy from trucks and buses and things. So I don't really need tall trees. I've realized that through the years. So this will have been, I used to have a whole row of these loquats all along the side of my property. And one died now on each end. So it is what it is. They're a fast-growing tree, so I'm not that terribly upset over it. Here you can see the little dish gardens with house leeks. This blue one is new. That one I got this year, the pot. And this is, I split out the leeks from this. This pot I got at a second-hand shop and left it out in the frost one year, so it did crack. The crackling that it has on the surface, was the way it was made to look old. So the crack only gives it character. However, eventually that character is going to split the bowl in half, so I'm just planning ahead. Actually, I'm telling a lie. I misjudged and didn't buy a big enough new pot. But what I'll do eventually, where I bought the blue pot, they had other sizes. So I'll probably get a larger one when this one breaks. But it may last a couple more years yet. Back here, my lavenders really like this spot. It gets a lot of sun, and if it's going to get more sun now that the loquat's going to be removed. The male cycad is about ready to have the cone taken out. They do eventually. I don't cut it. It will eventually loosen, and if you jiggle it, it will fall off in your hand. And that's what I do. This area is going to be reworked as well. The vines are taking over the fence. And I don't mind some of them. I don't mind the Virginia creeper because it doesn't damage the fence. In there, however, is also, from my neighbor's side, trumpet vine. Don't plant a trumpet vine if you live in zones 8B or higher. It will take over your yard, the neighborhood, and the world. Similar in growth characteristics to a, I can't think of the name of it now. I'll tell you a little bit later. The vine that has the large clumps of purple flowers, a wisteria that hang down. The one thing different is wisteria can tear, I've seen it, pillars off of a front porch. So that is a little stronger than the trumpet vine. Trumpet vine will pry fence boards apart. And of course, that's what I worry about since it's growing on top of my fence. Enough said about that. I'll trim it out and leave the others. Here, I still have Plumeria blooming. I've left the ones gone to seed because the pods still look pretty. Still getting a strawberry now and then. Wandering Dude has really spread out nicely. It's actually starting to show above the monkey grass. I've got it there. I've got it where Miss Mimi is. Miss Mimi does not like noises, as you can tell. And this saw palmetto, someone had made a comment last week about what a nice plant it was, and that's when I started looking at dates. Because the same time that that loquat tree was planted, 2015, there was a storm that blew through Alabama, and it knocked down 2 of my big oak trees, split them in half, and it pretty much covered all of my backyard. Thank God they didn't fall on my house. They're probably about 100 years old, and they used to be on the back side of this saw palmetto, right there with the green moss. Well, actually, where you see the fungus coming up, it's probably still growing on the old oak that's underneath. But when they cut the oaks out, they were probably about a 3 or 4 foot diameter trunk, and they were as tall as the large telephone pole. They actually hid the telephone pole from my view. But be that as it may, when they were dropping the trunk, it was dropped onto, I had to make decisions where to put stuff, and they dropped it on top of my saw palmetto. So in 2015, this saw palmetto was small at the time, but it was pounded flat, so much so that you could drive a lawnmower over the top of it without hitting the palmetto at all. So I didn't think it was going to live. I took some cuttings and spread them around in the backyard, but it came back, and it came back with a vengeance. And I think the pounding is probably what caused some of the curvature in the trunks that are growing now. So don't give up hope. When catastrophic things happen, you'll be surprised how plants can recover. They do want to live. Back in here, all is well. This is the overflow caladiums. They're actually doing a little better here. And there's a bloom stalk, a couple of bloom stalks forming. This is a cutting I took of the white angel's trumpet, one of which I planted in the pot. This one I planted directly in the ground. It does prefer the ground. You can see here it's doing much better. It's also in a slightly shadier location. Oh, I have to fill this up. I keep water in this. The birds like to take baths all over in the backyard. David's looking nice in the sun. Oh, the fruits are still ripening. They will turn orange eventually, and the fruits are starting to form on the other bloom stalk. That's one of the reasons why it's called a jelly palm, because it makes fruits, and of course you can make jellies with the fruit. I don't particularly care for the taste of the fruit. To me, it tastes like butterscotch or rancid butter, depending on how you feel the day. It's not a pleasant taste to me. It's sweet, I'll give you that much. If you don't have any other sugar around, it is sweet. And I cleaned all this up. It's still doing well. The hydrangea blooms are still growing. See, this cycad is already, the male is already starting to fall to one side. It will, like I say, eventually just snap off. Let's see if it does it today. Nope, not today. My ligularias are growing nicely. The small one that started doing really well was attacked by those dread black grasshoppers, which I think I can show you one. Here's one on the ground that has been dispatched. I accidentally, quote unquote, stepped on that one. I haven't seen that many in the backyard today, but what they'll do is they'll get on a leaf and eat and eat and eat and eat until there's no more leaf left. They like ligularia, and they also like these red flowers, amaryllis. Here you can see what the damage looks like. They just get on a leaf and just don't leave it until it's gone. So whenever I see them, I dispatch them quickly. Here you can see, ooh, this one is actually, that one's new. It has really started sprouting. Again, I just clumped them together and stuck them in the ground. I put them in each direction, north, south, east, and west. And later this year, I'll stick one more in between. I'd like to have a border of the sedum eventually. And it spreads so quickly that that might be next year. all the sedum I took was on this end, this side. I want it to drape over the pot, so I'm going to let it do its own thing there. My bay laurel tree has leafed out nicely. I have used the bay leaves that I harvested from it, and they are delicious. These Plumeria still in bloom, and you can see the Nico blue hydrangeas are getting larger and larger. My iochroma has finally caught. It's not wilting every day in the heat. Here is a purple daylily. It's called grape something or other. I have another one on this side, but it got apparently worked over by the wandering dude, so you don't see it. And here, this potato vine has really taken off, and you can see I started spiraling it around the stick, and this one ends here. Oh, let me turn it up a little. It's already past the middle, and of course on the other side, same thing. And you can see the leaves are coming. I told you the leaves would grow on that leafless stem. It's got little buds. Let's see if I put my finger here, you can see it. I gotta lower it a little bit. There it is. It's got little buds all along, and of course this leaf wasn't here last week, so it will leaf out and make a little archway over this statue. So everything is doing well with the onset of summer. The trick is trying to keep the weeds at bay. But so far, so good. And I still have the blooms on my Lenten roses. And these blooms are still to open. The Lenten rose was definitely a good thing to add to Zone 8B. This one was doing better. It didn't bloom till it got stomped on by the AT&T worker. But if he didn't stomp on it, I probably would eventually. That's why I keep a sharp stick in the middle to deter people. But it didn't deter him because he had work boots on. And here's the other one that was in a pot. So everything is really growing nicely back here. And I really do like the look of that plaque and the little archway of the potato vines. It's a use for potato vines, another pass-along plant. They actually sell those up north. They're weeds here. Once when you get one in your backyard, they will form potatoes on the actual vine that fall off, and when they hit the ground, they'll sprout. And the original potato that was planted will sprout back the next year. These potato vines have been there now for, I want to say 3 or 4 years without replanting. They're the last of them. They had gotten free and were growing up my neighbor's trees, because they will grow to the very tippy top of that popcorn tree and drop huge potatoes in the fall. You kind of have to watch your head. So they are something to keep in mind, or to keep under control when you plant them. But that's it for today. I hope you all have a beautiful sunny day, or a beautiful day. Go out and enjoy the sunny day if you can. Oh, there's Baby coming to visit and chat with Miss Mimi. Okay, have a good day now. Bye-bye.